Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome once again, dear friends, for the module on strategic trade and protectionism, theories and empirics as a part of NPTEL course. In the fourth lecture now, this is the fourth lecture where we are supposed to understand facts. These two lectures are actually dedicated for facts, figures. So, this particular lecture is targeted for understanding trade policies related facts and facilitations. The previous lecture was purely on directions and sources of trade to understand what kind of dependence on which country we have and how the member countries can able to tap the benefit, especially for India. Now, we are targeting for policy related segment and how policies are actually oriented towards facilitating trade. In this context, I am Dr. Pratap C. Mohanty as a faculty member in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Humanities Department in IIT Roorkee, get the privilege to explain the latest policies on it. And this is the one I have given the module to some of the practitioners, especially of Indian Revenue Services servants in Delhi. So, in this context, I am going to talk about trade policies for sure and why trade policies. Always the question comes to our mind, then why trade policies and or why facilitations. This is because of the fact that the present days competitions are very different. It is no more perfect, no more near perfect. Competitions are very cutthroat kind, and the byproduct of competition is resulting different products, differentiated product, not different product. So, product within products. Even the management guys, the faculties used to add even extra value additions to the product which we derive. Now, one of the important contribution of China in this segment is that they attach huge value to the product, especially in designing by look, by packaging. China is the number one in this segment. Then how to make the buyers inspired to purchase your product? What kind of facilitation should be given? What kind of export subsidies might be given, so that buyers will be actually very interested to purchase our product. So, therefore, differentiated product matters while discussing facilitation. Then second one is market access. Market access is actually dependent on the country's policies, country's restrictions. Now, as per the norms of WTO, tariffs and non-tariffs, especially tariffs as a concretized restriction must have been reduced in almost all the rounds of WTO, especially after the DDA round, Doha development round. There has been major discussion on this aspect to reduce restrictions, so that market access by the member countries should have been much better. Now, to facilitate trade, while we have better market access, protection is also discussed. Yes, we can protect, but in indirect channels. In formal protection or the nominal protection, the rate must have been very low as per the norm set by WTO as a member of WTO. So, India has been a member since its inception of WTO. So, earlier it was named as GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Now, from 1995 onwards, this name was changed to WTO. In that year onwards, China became the member. So, now protection and the effective protection is highly discussed in the present context when China gets the membership, and many other forms of strategies are developed. So, therefore, facilitations is important, and regionalism and multilateralism is important, groupism defining different type of qualities, coalition among the countries or cartelization of the countries is making the product different by look, by price, by competitive advantage in various other senses. Especially Gulf countries form the cartel in the mid 70s or I mean the early 70s. Many countries, especially US, got the major threat after formation of OPEC countries. So, they cartelize their products and they set standard of prices for their product as per the market demand. So, therefore, regionalism and mercantilism, multilateralism, not mercantilism, are very important while we are discussing trade facilitation. So, accordingly policies are framed. Now, as an anecdotal example or experience for your better understanding, dear students and participants, it is better to understand the East Asian crisis. There are other very recent phenomenon as well, like bubble crisis in 2007-8, US bubble crisis, and there are many Zimbabwe crises for hyperinflation, some million% rise in inflation should also be discussed while understanding trade policies. Now, if I just try to understand the context of East Asian crisis to miracle. Now, I won't believe especially ASEAN 5 countries, 5 economies, namely Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, South Korea and Thailand. These 5 countries actually form part of the biggest giant of East Asian countries, and there have been major jump of their GDP, and hence many trickle down effects of their GDP to other segments, other sectors of the country, till the period till the mid 1997. Even those growth rates are much higher than that of the OPEC countries. Now, this is a major blueprint for many developing countries as a lesson to learn. The developing countries actually tried to follow these blueprint. But one of the major concern in the IMF discussion is that had led to the major change in the growth rate has actually led them to a crisis, to a major crisis. So, some form of reform in IMF over the time have been discussed for an effective global financial architecture, so that these type of crises should not actually occur. Now, even if the crisis was felt in mid 1997, but these countries again could able to made it off in another 10 years. By 2025 or 2005, 6, these countries actually made themselves very stable, but in between there were actually major evidences of recession. I am coming to each of the discussion. So, there were not just the crises which has felt for their fall in their GDP, rather in terms of impacts noted for their currency and in terms of economic factors. So, suddenly they reversed the foreign capital inflows which actually fueled their growth. So, they experienced nearly highest growth rate, major growth rate nearly 3 decades. So, since there was no such major check, those were actually turned into a crisis experienced in 1997. So, from 97 till for another couple of years, there were experience of recession. Now, controversies are there whether the Asian economic growth miracle was actually fueled by their total factor productivity growth or by factor accumulation. So, there are two concepts: total factor productivity growth or accumulation, whether they have accumulated their quality factors which has actually made them stable, or just the total factor productivity growth which has contributed. And it is an observation that TFE actually matter a lot for their growth, for the accumulation was not so robust or sustainable. Now, this crisis actually has had a contagion effect to other many countries. So, many dependent countries to these Asian countries are also affected, and so therefore, there were cases of global financial crisis during the phase. So, therefore, intervention is required, intervention by the global institutions which are specifically meant for controlling these crises are very important. So, institutional framework or new financial architecture is always there to therefore, some institutional mechanism must have been there always to combat this kind of possibilities. And since there have been cross checks on the way of any growth, sustainability can be expected. So, spillover of these negative externalities can be reduced. So, therefore, institutional mechanism is required or the policies are required. So, East Asian crisis has been considered as one of the best lesson for the institutional mechanism to develop or to reform the institutional mechanism, so that countries will be growing in a sustainable manner so far as international trade is concerned. So, policies must be very sustainable. What were the plausible explanation of this miracle or the miracle to the burst which were experienced after some years? It has been observed that likewise in recent phenomenon over demand of the realty sector in US. So, it is considered the bubble of the realty sector actually turned into bust because of over finance to that sector. So, which could not able to convert to its potential demand in the market. So, therefore, there were other crises stem from the crisis of the bubble. Similarly, in this case where it was experienced that there were some cases of rational self-fulfilling panic, and accordingly some models and theories were developed. So, which emphasizes herd behavior of the investors, they convert into illiquidity, and so due to insolvency in the system. There are similarly cases of moral hazard observed. Moral hazard basically your the morality of the investors is hazardous. Your pattern of expectation in other forms is actually creating a threat to another one. So, so that continuously creating a threat to other competitors and eventually lead to a higher form of crisis. So, risk is attached. So, therefore, the bubble which was just created due to some forms of deceleration in the growth pattern, that has led to a burst in the East Asian. So, that was therefore called East Asian crisis. So, some in some article, some expert says that it is not miracle, it was just a mirage. Developing economies aiming for a rapid takeoff like the South Asian countries should actually adopt export oriented policies, which was practiced by ASEAN 5 economies. That was in fact one of the best approach. But export oriented policies should not be negated by any form of countervailing percentages supported by the countries against the WTO norm. Those ASEAN 5 countries virtually experienced quadrupled result, especially from the year 1970 to 1995, though the crisis was observed in the mid 1997. The growth rate which they experienced on the average was nearly 7%, which is much more double than that of OECD countries. OECD countries stands for the developed countries, topmost developed countries in the world. This is the group for the topmost developed countries in the world as per the World Bank definition. Organization of economic cooperation and development countries, they form the group. And when they experience this type of 7% on the average over such a period, 70 to 95, which is in fact rarely observed. Now, though India is following this track right now, but our we also experience this rate quite quite a decade from now, I mean before now. Now, since obviously we will expect many trickle down effects as well. Even the present government, if you look at the present Modi's government, where their proposition largely confined around big push through infrastructure, and they also emphasize trickle down theory, where their in contention is to emphasize the sectors that will grow and it will trickle down to the poorest section of the society. So, trickle down effect matters, and it was observed in those years as well. So, the first trickle down was observed in terms of life expectancy increased nearly 20%. Adult literacy increased by nearly 25% in this duration, which is the best across the globe. Simultaneously, it also corroborated to the fact that poverty reduced amongst the bottom 20% population, and which was especially the reduction among those was of 200% fall in the poverty during that phase. So, the trickle down effect actually helped the country to grow in a sustainable manner, but since there was no such countervailing policies or checks by the international bodies, could not able to sustain those rates vis-a-vis the strategies adopted by other countries. Now, this is what I have said, the structure of our whole content. Whole content structured into, I have already discussed in the previous lecture, where I say strategic policy, trade policy is very important, which are derived from imperfect competition in the trade and intra-industry trade. So, IO actually industrial organization is one of the part where the units of production or the firms can able to develop strategies, develop games to obtain highest benefits. They will retaliate and to maximize their best benefit out of it. Similarly, other strategies are through multilateralism or regionalism. Now, so this is what we said. So, policies are actually conceptualized accordingly. Once again I have to explain these things, since I did not emphasize in my first lecture on this. What kind of restrictions are there so far as faction facilitation is concerned for Indian products to be exported, or there should be Indian business in Indian soil. Present government have been has been repeatedly emphasizing startup India, stand up India, in many times, and there are many polished documents. So, do you think this has been actually contributed hugely? What is your view? I think there are mixed views so far, mixed views. These are very various instruments obtained by a government, maybe for a long run going to be contributing in a much better way than that of what we are experiencing. So, therefore, we should not just negating the steps. Now, some of the facts we suggest we collected from the Doing Business website till 2015, latest are actually there, but not authenticated correctly. So, therefore, I am emphasizing on 2014. So far as burdensome import procedures are concerned, there are various procedures to import product, many documentations to be done. I will talk about in my succeeding slides, where how many documents are required to export as well as import. So, among the score, import procedures are very complicated. It's very huge actually. And similarly, tariffs. Tariffs are also among very high, and corruption at the border, while misplacing documents or unnecessarily by the agents for trade, they also create some mispractices. Now, similarly, high cost and delay caused by domestic transportation, also delayed by international transportation is also a matter of concern. Domestic technical requirements and standards are also very important. Besides that, these are not all, I mean besides the crime and theft have not yet been also checked correctly. This should have been actually minimized or neutralized to near about 0%, could have been much better for countries' development. Inappropriate telecommunication infrastructure which connects the parties for trade. And I also try to check with South Asian countries and OECD countries, which we explained. Once again I am saying documents to import, number of documents India required to import is 11, whereas the South Asian countries required to import is as against India it is 10. Now, try to understand what kind of hassles are there for importing a product which we are actually using for re-exporting. If our import itself is problematic, we may not able to add value on right time. So, in this context, OECD countries look at their I mean try to understand OECD and their hassles, especially for import documentation. It is only 4 documents are required, they do not require so many documents. So, they make their importing very open. OECD countries, I told you, they are the high income groups, countries which are having high income as per the World Bank standards. Similarly, time to import, the days required to import, look at if any consignment is ready, 20 days are required for India to be received by another recipient being in India. So, look at the products and which kind of products we are importing and how this should be 20 days. But it in this front India is better than that of the South Asian countries. On the average South Asian countries, among all South Asian countries, 34 days. That means there are some South Asian countries where the number of days are much more than that 34. Whereas, for OECD countries the requirement is only 10. So, they are much lesser. To check the cost of import, especially transportation is one of the most important cost per container in US dollar term. Ours is lesser than that of the South Asian countries. Though South Asian countries are developed in many sense, but we have have landed in a better path to catch up to those levels. Of course, our rate is higher than that of the OECD one, but still we are competitive in this segment. So, therefore, we need to understand the facilitation carefully. Now, here I wanted to say that always our competition, our products, our destinations are very visible in front of us. Some are not visible, but opportunities are there. I wanted to say opportunities are there. What we do? Opportunities are always attached with risk. So, we need to bear the risk strategically and manage the risk. How we can manage it? Because risk are not just one, it is not linear, there are non-linearity in the risk attached. So, since non-linearity is the pattern of risk, it is very very difficult to bear the challenges. So, therefore, there are many risks. Risk may be in terms of because of our mechanization of trade. Trade is more or less becoming highly mechanized. If you are emphasizing service trade, but if you labor oriented, then so there will be possibility of absorption of labor. But if trade is actually contributing or having connected to job loss, or our import or the export include those units are actually include high end technologies, but India is a labor intensive country. We have our labor we have more labor abundance as compared to many countries in the world. So, and that too it is very cheaper as well. So, but if you do not absorb labor, it is a bigger concern. So, therefore, we need to talk about job loss very seriously. This is one of the very important aspect. So, we need to think about. So, not just importing, I mean some of the segment we just import, but that will replace our domestic production. Therefore, it replace our employment, which is a major concern. And the products, if it is not controlling diseases, disease related issues, India in this segment, health segment also it is attached to many risk. Crime related, similarly natural disasters in many parts of India, our places are attached to natural risk, many evidences are there. So, such type of trade must have been done for future, so that our trade must be connected in a holistic manner and it controls or contribute to the environment sustainably. Similarly, financial crisis, because many of the bubbles so far observed is related to financial crisis. So, let us think a while on it, think very carefully how to connect each other, what type of product must be actually imported, what type of exported, so that our pattern must be all connected to each other and to minimize in all the segment, all kind of crisis must have been minimized. So, therefore, what you do when we have multiplicity of risk attached to our trade. So, domestically as well as when we open our border, it might create further risk. So, therefore, we need to take support, strategize the support. Sharing risk may minimize our burdens. So, to whom we should share? Generally, when person is in trouble, family, make it a broader family. Your family is not domestically defined, it is now a global family. And community, not just a family, I mean not just a family surrounded by few people, make it a community instead of family. And you enrich your enterprises, government, international community, banks or blah blah organizations as well, so that the risk can be shared. So, therefore, we talk about institutions, role of institutions, maybe bank, police, industries, and simultaneously thinking about environmental sustainability of it. So, trade policy is actually covering all those aspects, simultaneously thinking about all directions of control, so that it will not be creating any threat. So, India's trade policy, the recent or the latest trade policy is actually 2015 and 20. foreign trade policy documents are coined in every 5 years. So, which actually is related to exports and imports which are regulated by foreign trade policy, notified by central government in exercise of powers, conferred by section 5 of India's Foreign Trade Act 1992. It is yet guided by India's Foreign Trade Act under section 5, which guides export, imports and other policy related issues guided by central government. So, presently as I already said, it is the latest one is 1520. Now, the mid-term review of this policy document has already been published. Mid-term review, recently mid-term review of this 1520 FTP has been published. The document is available freely in the website, and this policy was effective or has been effective since 1st April 2015. Okay. So, therefore, as I already told you, how to export is very important. We require various steps. These are all available in the slide. You can follow my slides to understand, and all those details will be explained while we will be landing on export procedures. So, we have establishing organizations, opening bank account, we should have permanent account number, PAN number, similarly other IEC number, membership certificate, and broadly sampling, pricing, negotiation, covering risk. These are available in India Trade Portal website. There are procedures are actually 12. It is clearly written these 12 has to be followed to export. Now, processing an export order, it has to be in this order only. You have to start with, to export your product, you have to start with confirmation of your order with another party, procurement of goods, then you have to follow in this order only. So, as per the FTP 1520, all export contracts and invoices shall be denominated either in freely convertible currency of Indian rupees, so far as merchandise trades are concerned, or current account units are concerned. Export proceeds should be realized in freely convertible currency except for export to Iran. While we are exporting Iran, we need not convert it to rupees. In all other, we are supposed to convert it to rupees. Export proceeds should be realized in 9 months. 9 months, it should not be actually exceeding that. That is a strict binding regulation. So, documentation, 3 broad documentation as per the 2015-20 is concerned. Bill of landing, usually those export houses, they are guided by this. Commercial invoice cum packaging list, shipping bill or bill of, and this is also called bill of entry, must have been there. These 3 are mandatory documents for import and export. Other documents like certificate of origin, inspection of certificate may be required as per the case when essential. Similarly, submission of documents to banks, these are the bill of exchange. As I told you, bank require these documents for approving you or giving certificate. So, FTP 2015 will carry forward this section, especially FTP policies when we take off the FTP segment in our latter part of our discussion, where we will talk about some exemptions, trade facilitations, ease of doing business as per the Government of India documents. Especially most important part is dealing with the disputes. We will take it forward in detail. I have already discussed there are 28 agreements, but beside that we have the present agreements which are in presently running, AFTA, ASEAN, PTA, some SICA, SIPA. These are actually going to be discussed in detail in the trade block chapter. We will discuss in detail. I will carry forward all those things in detail. 18 currently running. With this, I think I have to stop here. We will continue in our next class with background to classical theory and why theory emerged, which are the contexts by which theory are actually discussed. Thank you so much.